We are headed over to GreenHill Art Gallery for the exhibition of two Asheville artists, Daniel Essig and Robert Johnson, called The Last Remaining Cathedral. Stick around as Daniel and Robert tell us about their artwork, which will be on display at GreenHill until June 12th. They both exhibit artwork that represents man's relationship with the natural world.
The idea originally was to put my photographs into a book, and it was a better way to look at the images. Instead of walking by them like paintings on the wall, it became more intimate. And as I started creating the books and making, and I supported myself for years just making hundreds of little tiny wooden books at craft shows. And as I made them, I got more interested in making smaller and smaller work, where it's just maybe a couple inches tall. And as I made those pieces, it became kind of a challenge to figure out how to sell them. So I started carving like a little environment for the little book. It started off like little arches that the book sat in, and that kind of evolved into the animals now. I mean, it took a long time, like 10 or 12 years. A lot of people assume that I make books because I love books, but it's more, I have I really kind of make books because I want to be more part of my family. I have a brother who's a writer, I have a sister who's a librarian. So I figured there's a connection there, but I didn't do books. I never made books with words. All the books were blank, and the content was within the structure. So the book, there was content to all the books I make, but just not on the pages. They're within the structure of the book. So the books up front are more, that was kind of the beginning. They're more like when I was kind of jumping between just a book you would hold or read, or like a journal, to books that were like purely sculptural. So the binding was the same, but I started to think about books that would just be held on the wall. So the binding and the cover was there. And then I got into also manipulating books, finding a book and then cutting into it, and then piercing in it through, if you're talking about the balance pieces. And those are pieces that I've made throughout my career, but I don't really sell that many. They're structures that interest me that I just do kind of on my own time. They're definitely not what people think when they see a book, and I like to push that thought.
What he has done is taken these books completely out of their element.
I take them out of context, but I also, the books become like elements as well as a thing. Like a lot of the creatures, the sturgeon, and one of the guard pieces up front with the fins, they look like they're wood, but if you flip the pages, it's still a bound book. And I find that very, very exciting and kind of freeing from having a book that you have to read, or a book that you could just look at and just kind of understand visually and bring your own stories to it.
I was curious as to his observation as to what people thought of his artwork.
They're generally fascinated. They don't necessarily consider it to be a book, and I have not a problem with that. They're truly just, they're sculptures, but I do feel strongly that I have there's a book element someplace within it, if not a traditional binding someplace in the piece as well. But they're really truly sculptural pieces.
Naturally, we cannot leave without mentioning the most profound piece of artwork behind Daniel.
This is a piece that I've worked on probably for the last 4 or 5 years. And it's a large piece. Most of the work that I make is for sale, but these kind of pieces, because I know that I probably will not sell it. I can't spend a lot of time on it, so I could just work on it in little bits and pieces as I go around and I do teaching or I'm working on sculptural pieces. So I've lived with it for 5 years in my studio, and it's a big piece. It's 6 feet long. It has a 7-foot wingspan on it, so it's dominating that way. Generally, I work very, very small. The piece holds 9 books. The smallest, about 1 inch tall, is within that structure. The piece behind me is the largest piece I've ever made, by far. So it's like a large piece that holds small, tiny little books and other little relics within it.
The artwork that he does is his main source of revenue.
I make the books, and I sell the sculptures, but I also do a lot of teaching, where I teach like wooden books, where I teach people how to make the small book. And within the crowd here, there's several students that I've had in the past.
So it took him about 5 years of work. I wondered, with all that time put in, from a business standpoint or income perspective, that's a lot of time put in.
It's a piece that I don't sell very often, but it's a piece that I get a lot of press for, and it gets it gets into museums, it gets into publications. So that's a piece.
Okay, so now I understand. Daniel uses this piece as his marketing tool.
Very, very, very true, yeah. Pretty much have collected objects my entire life. I keep at home like a cabinet that has tiny little boxes in it, and there's objects that I've collected since I've been about 6. It's what I call a visual diary. There's they become like souvenirs of a lifetime. So the objects themselves remind me of like a place or a time in my life. And those objects are the things that I build into every piece that I make. So a lot of times they're fossils, little rocks, pieces of bone, rusty nails, that I can't help but collect. And that a lot of the objects in the collection I keep, but an awful lot of them I'll work into the piece. The bigger piece, the more precious objects I'll put in it, because I know that I probably will keep it forever.
What do you want people to take away from your artwork when they see it?
I want them to see like books in a new way, that they don't have to be something to keep a journal in. They can be sculptural forms. It might, help them. A lot of people who would buy my books that were more as journals, and it got them to write in other books, but I just want them to see that the book form can almost be anything. I have, I think, 20 pieces in the show. It's by far the most pieces I've ever exhibited at one time. There's work that dates from the earliest part of my career to pieces I just finished within the last couple weeks, including the croc. It was a piece that I've worked on. I finished it about 2 years ago, and then I worked back into it again just right before the show, and probably put another 150 to 200 hours in the croc alone. So it's that idea. So it's a great chance not only to see Robert Johnson's 30 years of his paintings, but also see pretty much a full scan of my own work.
The other half of the exhibition features Robert Johnson, who chronicles his observations of nature.
He's an artist with me, and we both live in Asheville, and he does paintings that are very centered around nature and wildlife, and similar. We're both interested in nature, and kind of like the title of the show. We talked about it. We tried to work out collaborations for the show, and both of us just got too busy to do it. But I totally love his work, and having a chance to see so much of it in one place and really be able to stand back and look at it is awesome.
I live up in Silo, up in the mountains. It's in the valley just below Mount Mitchell. I've lived there since 1972, and I paint full time. Every other year I like to take travel to another part of the world where I can see the natural environment, which is the focus of my work. And so I go to these places. I realize that the natural environment is slowly becoming squeezed out as development and so forth happens. So I feel a little bit like a pilgrim in the Middle Ages that's going around to these sites that, for me, have a very special spiritual feel to them. And when I'm going around to visit these natural areas, it's like going to different cathedrals all around, hence the name of the show. And so I love the mountains of North Carolina, and that's really where I'm grounded in the natural environment there. But I still like to see other areas in the world. And I feel like I'm an observer and a recorder of what's happening right there. That's kind of my job, and interpret it through the observations of what I see there, but also through my subjective experience. And also, when I go out to these places, I record things in detail. So things like my notebook pages, where I go out and I observe, this is what I saw on one walk, is exactly what I recorded on the note, the key elements I recorded there. So like here I saw hooded mergansers and beauty berries that were blooming in this area at this state park in North Carolina. So in a way it's a record so that people can come back. I date them, 50 years from now, and they might say, we're not seeing hooded mergansers here anymore, or the beauty berries have all disappeared, or even maybe they've increased. But it's making a record of what's there at that time. And this is how I begin my paintings, is by going out and observing and recording what I've observed.
Has how many different places have you gone out and recorded things from? In
North Carolina or in the world?
In the world in general.
Oh, okay. My usual way of working is I'll take a 3-month trip and go and travel to find natural areas in different parts of the world. I've been to Ecuador and stayed at biological stations out in the wild. Panama, New Zealand, Costa Rica, been up to Canada. I did a whole series of Southwest deserts, Northwest national parks. I think those are the main series that I've done.
Have there been any that have been torn down for building a neighborhood or a mall or whatever it may be?
Trying to think. Not specifically for that, but yeah, I know there's one place up in Maine near Acadia National Park that I went that a development has moved in. But,
your process is sort of unique. I've never seen anything like that. How did you come up with doing something like that?
Good question. Mainly, I just really enjoyed being out in nature, and I just started recording what I saw out there, and started doing my notebook pages, and then I decided to develop paintings from that. And in my recording, what I try to get down isn't just objectively what I see where they would come out like photographs of what I see, but of my take on what I see, sort of my feelings about the place, my subjective relationship to it. A lot of times I include like the native culture with the places that I like to connect that to also. So they're not photographic, objective representations of a place, but sort of bringing my full being to the place and recording that.
Right, because of course you're going to bring some of you into the painting.
Exactly.
Because otherwise you would just be a photographer then.
Exactly, right. Or paint realistically to make them look like photographs, which some people do.
Are you in any way trying to bring out like a message or a feeling of anything?
Yes. My sense in the work is what I try to convey is my experience of the place, but also how being out in nature can uplift you through the beauty of being there, through the sense of being connected with that place where we all came from, that is bigger than ourselves. I consider myself a pantheist. A pantheist is somebody that believes that the natural environment, that what has been created here on Earth, is actually that God is in everything, and that when we look at something, and which is easiest for me to do out in the natural environment, that you're connecting with something much larger than yourself, which could be called God, it could be called the larger ecosystem where everything is connected, and then you can get yourself connected, tap into that and connect yourself with that. And that's why I'm very interested in religious art, and there are a lot of elements in my work that are based on like medieval altarpieces and so forth, and religious art from other cultures that are connected to it.
That is awesome. Anyway, tell us about. Oh, keep going. Go ahead.
So I hope that my goal is to encourage people to get out into nature and have some of this kind of experience of being connected, and then I think people will realize the importance of the natural environment, and will take steps to value it much higher than we do in our culture.
Okay. Tell me about you started a little bit about your process, and this is your this is, I guess, your general, your overall, and then you kind of build off of that afterwards.
Exactly. So I go out to an area, and basically I record just what I see, what birds, plants, flowers, and I try to find out about, identify them. I take field guides with me, and then I try to find out about the ecosystem in which they exist, so I can see the larger picture and the connection with the different things in this one ecosystem. And I will make notes in pencil and then put watercolor in them. And these are the kinds of notes that I take when I'm out there. Then I collect these notes and I'll put them together and combine them into a larger painting.
And you're taking almost, right here, you're almost taking illustrated notes and written notes to kind of
Right.
both kind of complement each other.
Yeah, and identifying things so I remember what I saw and so forth. Yeah. These two are, if you're interested, but these two are from Pettigrew State Park in North Carolina, and currently I'm working on a series of paintings, notebook pages from all the state parks in North Carolina, and the state parks reproduce one of them and sell them online and at their little visitor center. So that's an ongoing project that I have right now, and I'm hoping eventually to do a book of these notebook pages from all the state parks in North Carolina. And that's an ongoing project that I've been working on for the last few years. Okay, this piece is from Panama. I took a 3-month trip down to Panama, and I wanted to get to different areas in the country. So I went all the way from near the Costa Rican border in the north, all the way down to the Darien, which is that wild area which you can't drive through between southern Panama and Colombia. It's a wild area. There have been kidnappings down there by Colombian guerrillas and so forth. So you can only go down there with a guide. So I went down there with 2 other people, and you have to fly in. So we flew into this little village, then got on a boat and went out to this building that we could stay in. And then the next day, they took us to this little village of the Embara Indians that live there. And it was a real National Geographic type moment. The Indians that live there, traditionally, the women don't wear any tops, and the men wear these pink loincloths. But so when we went to the village, half of the village were dressed that way, and half of the village had Western clothes on, like t-shirts and shorts, the women and the men. And what happened was that a missionary from Greensboro had gone down there and had converted half of the village to Christianity, and had convinced them that walking around without tops or in a loincloth was not a moral thing to do. So you had half of the village that was Christian and half of them that were traditional. And there was, of course, no electricity in the village except for one generator, which generated electricity for the church. And the only thing it was used for was to broadcast the sermon from the church on Sunday mornings, so that the whole village would hear the sermon. So anyway, I went down there and stayed just for the day. But the traditional craft down there is basket weaving. And if you look down here, this is one of the designs from the Embara Indians that it's a turtle in their design. And I actually saw a turtle down there in the water and realized where it came from. So I started it out as a traditional design and then slowly turning into a real turtle. And here is a bird from a traditional design slowly turning into a bird that I saw down there. And so we had to go in there on a little boat, and there were these huge mangrove swamps that we went through. And these were all birds and animals that we saw as we were going through the mangrove areas there.
What was your feeling towards the split that you had noted earlier between the Christian and the traditional natives?
Well, obviously the Christians were getting more westernized, and it was almost inevitable. And you could tell that they did have contact with the Westerners, because at the time, it was not long after the bombing of the World Trade buildings that I was down there. And so one of the three of us that were tourists had a beard, and we came out of the little canoe into the village. We're walking in, and the kids come running up to us and look at him and pointing, and they're going, "Osama bin Laden, Osama bin Laden." So obviously they're getting influenced by and having a connection with Western culture. And I see it as, almost inevitable. And again, it's like I'm recording a disappearing element to our world that we're having, that's actually happening. I feel like I'm an observer and a recorder and a witness to what's still there.
And you think eventually all of them will become
Probably,
Westernized?
eventually, yeah. I mean, the only way they have right now of making any money to buy any Western goods is through selling crafts that they make there to the few tourists that come there once in a great while, but that's about it.
And that's their main source of revenue, as you had noted?
Yeah, otherwise they're self-sufficient.
Right, so they grow their own stuff.
Yeah, and fish a lot.
Very hands-on type
Exactly,
things.
right.
And very connected with nature, which is what
Exactly.
Is your whole thing.
And so it's a little bit hard to see, but you see that it's almost inevitable. And I think we need to be really careful in how we handle nature and cultures that are connected to the natural environment. And it's really important that they not disappear, either one of those. I'm very supportive of organizations like Nature Conservancy. I've done a whole project for Nature Conservancy and Wilderness Society and conservation organizations. Because I think what they're trying to do is preserve some of this, what I see as sacred areas that need to be preserved. Exactly, yeah. And that's another one of my my things, that I hope my work attracts people to get outside to some of these nature areas, and that we don't spend all our time in cyberspace, but spend time in nature in real physical space. I think that's really important for people to make that connection. This nature deficit disorder they talk about, and I believe that it's really true. We need to keep that connection for our own mental and spiritual health. I've been doing this kind of work for 40 years now, and this is a retrospective show, and it shows sort of my progress of different chapters in my life. To me, it's like a memoir of showing, this is what I did back then, this is what I did next, this is what I did. So it's like an autobiographical book almost that's put out there. So for me, it's had that effect of going back over my life and seeing the progression of my work. And hopefully people will come and enjoy the show, and it'll be of interest to people, and that a lot of the paintings are from North Carolina that are places that people can get to easily, and hopefully it'll encourage people to get out more and enjoy